a couple of things that I rushed through. I'm trying my hardest to slow down. And I went to Tom and Courtney's last night to get some critique on presentation and everything. And they're like, you gotta slow down. And I was like, oh man, I'm really trying to slow down, so I need to slow down even more. I've known this stuff for a very long time, and I get real excited, and it gets me going, because I'm just like, in this and this and this area, and y'all are like, what did you say? Go back 9 slides, please. So I'm going to try to do that, and so we're going to touch on a couple of things that I feel like I did not give them the time they needed. They're very important. They're going to come up today, so I want to go back and touch on those real quick. First of all, I want a show of hands. If you woke up this morning thinking you were going to connect Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Malachi, Matthew, and Revelation. Who woke up liar. Nobody's ever done that.
You're a liar.
I woke up thinking I was going to connect with the dog. Oh, good. So I took the dog to be good.
Not quite the same, but we're gonna try to do that today. We're gonna try to do that today, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. Again, I get excitable. Don't let me get going too fast. Say, slow down, Court. Just tell me to slow down. We're gonna review those two. We're gonna read some in Isaiah 3 leading up to 4:1. I'm gonna let Tom explain what's going on in 4:1 because he's already done a bunch of work on that. And then we're gonna get into very familiar passages that you will see, but you might see them in a different light after we're done. The parable of the vineyard and the parable of the heirs. That's in chapter 5 of Isaiah, not the book of Matthew. Right? They're in the book of Matthew. Don't look at me like that. The first thing I wanted to go back and touch on, I want everybody to turn to Matthew chapter 21. So this is Christ coming into town on the donkey, right? If y'all remember, if you're familiar with this chapter, you should be real familiar with it. He's coming into town on the donkey. All the people start following him. The kids are praising him. He fulfills some prophecies there. He goes into the temple, starts overturning the money changers' table. And then he leaves. He goes east of town to Bethany. It's some a Muslim town today. I don't know the name of it. It's still there, but it's a Muslim name if you try to find it on a map. You have to go past the Mount of Olives to get to it. So he goes out to Bethany to stay the night. And I'm here in verse 17, verse 18. Okay, Matthew 21. He comes back into the city in the morning, and he's hungry, he needs to eat. And he comes upon, verse 19, he comes upon this fig tree. And it had, let me just read it. And when he saw a fig tree in the way, he came to it and found nothing thereon, but leaves only. And said unto it, let no fruit grow on thee henceforward forever. And immediately the fig tree withered away. The apostles, the disciples were like, whoa, did you see that? Whoa. Christ says, verily I say unto you, if ye have faith and doubt not, ye shall not only do this which is done to the fig tree, but also if ye shall say unto this mountain, be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, it shall be done. This fig tree, and if your mind should be, by now, with this class, your mind should be racing. That is figurative. So there was a literal tree there. It represents something.
Yeah.
Your mind should be racing on what that thing represents. That fig tree was not producing fruit. So he takes it, he says to the apostles, he's there in Jerusalem, and I'm pretty sure when he says this mountain, I'm pretty sure he's pointing at Mount Moriah and the Temple Mount, saying, yeah, just like that fig tree, you're going to do to this mountain of oppressors that has come up against you. You're going to you're going to have that mountain be removed and cast into the sea. He's going to destroy it. He's going to do it in a violent way. What he did to that tree, he's doing to this mountain that he's pointing at. See, it's got to be Mount Moriah. It's inside Jerusalem. Or he's not pointing to any other mountain. Maybe Mount Zion. I don't know. They're both inside the city. Well, Revelation, this is talking about the family tree of Judaism. This is talking about the commerce of Jerusalem. It's more on the commercial side. It says the exact same thing. Take this millstone, cast it into the sea with violence. This figurative Babylon, which I'm saying represents Jerusalem, will be thrown down.
That's Jerusalem.
It's Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem. This is for sure Jerusalem. The point of this class is I'm trying to prove that this is Jerusalem. Okay? When he says cast it into the sea, what does he mean? Don't think literal. What does he mean when he says cast it into the sea? He's gonna destroy it, but that's not what I'm looking for. Specifically the sea. What does the sea represent? Some girl that has not been back here said at the very first.
She just had her baby.
I didn't know she's pregnant.
What? She was trying to have the baby in here.
Male. Not observant, male.
Well, anyways, yeah, she
We'll be
said
talking
it
about
was-
the child labor pangs later in 13.
She said that it was, the sea was the dividing of the people, that there wouldn't be a division of the people anymore.
Represents the Gentiles.
Right.
Correct. It represents, be thou removed, I'm going to throw you to the Gentiles. I'm going to take away this kingdom from you and give it to the Gentiles. The Gentiles were going to destroy it and they were going to have it going forward. That's what he's saying there. He's not saying take this plant that weirdly died and go throw it in the water. He's saying, you see this temple, this mountain that represents Judaism? I'm giving it to the Gentiles. I'm taking it away from them. We will come back to
Yeah,
this.
it's a big deal because it's part of the promised land, right?
Absolutely.
So this is the last of the promised land. The promised
Absolutely.
land is gone. There is no more land
The
promised.
old version of it is gone.
Yeah.
It's being desolated. It's being destroyed. It's being thrown to the sea. It's being cast into the sea. Okay? And that's a very bad thing for a Jew. The Gentiles were unclean. They were abominations. We're like, oh, okay, he's just giving it to other people. It's not just he's giving it to other people. He's giving it to the unclean, unworthy, dirty stranger from afar Gentiles. It was a big deal. Pressing buttons. The next one I wanted to go over is this one. Turn to Luke 23. And guys, I promise all these are going to come back together and connect. This one not as much, but that first one will. Luke 23. Luke 23, anybody know what's going on in Luke 23 before you look? Familiar with that chapter? Pretty famous historical chapter. It's why you're here.
Prophecy.
Crucified.
It's crucifixion of Christ. Here. We've got Herod and Pilate. Huh?
That's what my answer was.
I know, you were correct. You were correct. Gold star. Gold star.
I would like to have a real gold star, please, so that I can wear it and people can see it.
I got a sucker for you. Hold on.
Wow.
You have one.
There's your treat. Tom's going to pass out blue pops for everybody that gets a question right.
You gotta pass out one, you gotta pass out third.
Man thumbs.
And some nails.
So Pilate and Herod are arguing over what to do with Christ. Pilate's like, oh, I didn't do anything, man. Herod is like, no, we gotta kill him. Everybody wants to kill him. This is gonna make me popular. Let's kill him. Pilate's like, whatever, dude, and delivers him to the Jews. And so they go, and you start reading in 24, Pilate gives the sentence that they're gonna be able to execute Christ. They go, they take him away, in verse 27. And there followed him with great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented. They were crying after this. They loved Christ. But Jesus turning them to these Jewish women, he says unto them, daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, weep for yourselves. Jerusalem, weep for yourselves. The days are coming when you're not going to want to have kids. Verse 29. Daughters of Jerusalem, the days are coming where you will be saying, verse 30, then they shall begin to say to the mountains, fall on us, and to the hills, hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. I read the Revelation version of it, if you didn't pick that up. Revelation 6:16 is quoting Christ, who quotes Isaiah, got it from Christ in the beginning, saying, Jerusalem, when I destroy you, when the wrath from the Almighty comes, you're going to say this. Revelation says, hey, the time is here now. Now you're saying this. This book is about the destruction of Jerusalem. It's a direct quote. You shouldn't even really need any other verses. He's saying, oh, daughters of Jerusalem, you're going to say to the rocks and to the mountains and to the hills, fall on us, hide us from the wrath of God. Cry for yourself, because that's what you're about to be saying. Don't cry for me. Revelation 6:16 says the same thing. Revelation is about the destruction of Jerusalem. Then let's go to Isaiah 3. And I'm going to kind of speed read there a little bit to set the tone for Tom. And Tom is going to give us a little bit of insight on 4. So go to chapter 3. Start in verse 8. For Jerusalem is ruined, Judah is fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord, to provoke the eyes of his glory. The show of their countenance doth witness against them. They declare their sins as Sodom. Who was spiritually called Sodom in Egypt? Jerusalem was. Relentlessly called Sodom. The Egyptian part is a little more metaphorical. You'll see it, but you have to try harder to see it. Sodom is just in your face, every single book of the Bible. Woe unto their souls, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. Say ye to the righteous that it shall be well with him, for they shall eat of the fruit of their doings. Woe to the wicked, Verse 12. As for my people, children are their oppressors. Oppressors. The Jews were oppressing the Christians. And women rule over them. My people, which lead thee, cause thee to err, and destroy the way of the past. Ye heavens, you rulers of Sodom. The Lord standeth up and plead, and standeth to judge the people. The Lord will enter into judgment with the ancients of his people and the princes thereof, for ye have eaten up the vineyard. That's where we're ultimately going tonight. You have eaten up the vineyard. You should be thinking, Matthew, when Christ is sitting there giving the parable of the vineyard. I think it's Matthew 21. It's just a different part. What mean ye that you beat my people to pieces and grind the faces of the poor? Moreover, the Lord said, because the daughters of Zion's are haughty, and then he goes in for several verses here, which I'm going to skip, going off on the daughters of Zion, the women of Jerusalem here. And he gets to verse 25, and he says, your men are going to fall by the sword, which, by the way, that is quoted in Luke 21:24 when talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. That passage is not in question. The Luke 21 passage is not. And her gates shall lament and mourn, and she being desolate shall sit upon the ground. Daughters of Jerusalem, you've done all these bad things. All your men are going to be killed. And then that leads us to chapter 4, verse 1. This is a very peculiar passage to me. It may not be to y'all, but it was to me, and we got stumped on it for a while because I kept reading something that I thought wasn't there. I had to put it in Tom, and we both got it on different levels. And I'll take y'all through that in a second, but if you I'll read verse 4:1, and we'll let Tom talk for a minute. And in that day,
Do you have a slide for that? Forward.
yes I do.
Yeah.
Thank you. And in that day, and remember, in that day, that should be sending alarm bells off in your head in the days of Christ. Okay? I don't know if it's true 100% of the time, but I've yet to find one where it's not. The prophecy is ultimately talking about the time of the Messiah. In that day, 7 women shall take hold of one man, saying, blah, 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 only let us be called by thy name to take away our reproach. Okay? I'm going to let Tom take over, and then I'm going to go back and kind of tell you how we went about this.
Okay.
I'll do the what you got, please.
Yeah, sure. Whatever. Okay, one administrative thing before we get going. So we got Marcy put together a CCD room for us, and part of what we're going to, this is courts. I don't know why I'm saying we. This is like I've got barely anything in this, but we're going to. I'm helping him figure out how to load content into CCB. So if you want, put your name on here. Email might be optional. It'd be not a bad idea. But if you put your name on here, then we'll get you added to the group in CCB online, and then we'll put the content for the class up there. It's one giant presentation, so what we're aiming to do is cut the slides that we actually do in the class, put them up for each day so that you can download the content and stuff like that, so that it's there for your reference. Clicker. All right. In this passage in Isaiah 4:1, he had in the prior slide there was a truncated version of this. It says, "In that day, 7 women shall take hold of one man," and he skips a part. The part that he skips is kind of important. It says, "We will eat our own bread and wear our own clothes. Only let us be called by thy name to take away thy reproach." What does that mean? Eat our own bread, wear our own clothes. Well, there's an interesting thing that is somewhat in the Bible and somewhat not in the Bible that helps to make sense of this. So what I wanted to talk about is this idea. There's a phrase that's repeated in Jewish culture, and it's also, I'll show you the Bible references for it as well. But I want you to be thinking this, okay? That when you see the phrase food, clothing, and conjugal rights, or food, clothing, and marital rights, or food, clothing, and children. That conjugal rights, marital rights, children, it all means the same thing. So we're going to be talking about Jewish prenups, okay? Every Jewish wedding for the last thousands of years has had a prenuptial agreement called a ketubah, all right? Now, the ketubah is an explicit contract, all right? And we don't spend a lot of time on this because it was kind of a cultural assumed thing that was going on. And when we looked at this passage, as soon as Court showed it to me, he's like, I'm not sure what's going on there. I was like, that's marriage language. Because you spot this food, clothing, and conjugal rights in some places, and you know that's the core language of the ketubah. So ketubah is a prenuptial agreement. They started explicitly during the time of the Babylonian captivity. And there's an interesting historical tradition that happens with the Jews even today, that a lot of them want their ketubahs written in Aramaic. All right, so if you're a language nerd, most of the Old Testament is in Hebrew. For a period of time, the Jews got taken into Babylonian captivity, and the language shifted slightly from Hebrew to Aramaic. Aramaic is similar-ish to Hebrew. I don't know, think of it like Creole dialect in you know, you go down south and, I don't know. It's similar-ish, it's also dissimilar enough to be its own language. Anyways, the tradition started then, but I'll show you in a minute that the concept of food, clothing, and conjugal rights goes back as far as even the Exodus. So at the beginning of the onset of Judaism, this concept of what's going on with men and women in the marriage expectations is laid out. Here's the idea. There's actually, it's pretty beautiful in a sense. What's going on with marriage with this idea? And the idea is that a man will provide food to the woman, and the woman will cook the food and present love back to him. He presents her with love, she returns the love in return. He'll present her with clothes, and she'll then, clothing material, and she'll then take those and make clothes for the family and return the love. He'll provide her with children, and then she'll give the children back to him, in the sense of, and then they produce an inheritance and the land promises and all that comes with that. It's actually kind of beautiful. But this section is taken from Wikipedia on word for word. The content of a ketubah is in essence a two-way contract that formalizes the various requirements of the Jewish law for the husband and the wife. So they each have specific requirements. Yeah, go ahead.
This wasn't done with the actual people getting married. Was this done by the parents? Or was this really
Yes. So
the boy and the girl?
we can see an illustration of this. There's a process for it. So the process of the ketubah is a contract that's explicit. So we see this in a couple times that are sort of implied. So like when Jacob, for example, wants to marry Rebecca, right? Not Rebecca, Rachel. He wants to marry Rachel, and Rachel's father says, you're gonna have to work for me for 7 years, and then you can do it. That is a contract setup that would be written into the ketubah. All right, so there's something in trade. So there's an agreement made with the father on behalf of the girl, and that goes on. So there has to be something in trade, and then there's technically 4 parts that are common. There's always the food, clothing, and conjugal rights, but there's also a reference to if there's a divorce, then the things that are contributed into the marriage will be returned to the woman. That's not part of what's in this passage, so I kind of left that out. But what I'm hoping to point out is that there is this food, clothing, conjugal rights thing that happens over and over again. Here's a quick picture of an actual ancient ketubah. They're ornate, they're interesting looking. If you wanted to go to Etsy and buy a ketubah today, they're anywhere from $350 to $1,000, depending on how ornate they are. They're interesting, and so they're written in Hebrew or Aramaic. A lot of the modern day ketubahs will have like the Hebrew Aramaic and then an English counterpart to it. Here's an example of an ancient one. So this is part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this is the Papyri Yarden, and this is the 10th document in Papyri Yarden. If you're nerd enough to go look it up, good luck. The point I wanted to point out to you is here's an actual contract that was done between Babitha, this Jewish woman, and her husband, okay? So this is actually the ketubah. And it says, I will feed you and clothe you and bring you into my house. Food, clothing, children, okay? All right, we see this over and over and over again. Food, clothing, conjugal rights, food, clothing, marital rights, food, clothing, children. Children were such an important part of a woman's identity at this period of time. If you remember back in Genesis, there's a girl, there's a guy named Jairus, and Jairus makes a promise to God that if you'll deliver me from this battle, whatever meets me at my front door, I'll offer it to you. And his daughter meets him at the front door, and it is the worst. So he goes to her and he's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I told God about this, and she goes, it's fine. You made a promise to God. Let's go ahead and do this. But first, let me mourn my life? No. She wants to mourn her virginity. That's how important children were in the identity of women in the Old Testament time. And so if you look at Sarah and Abraham, Sarah was upset because she couldn't have children. Over and over again, this idea, and this becomes part of the expectation in the culture at the time, that children is like food, clothing, children. This is a big deal, okay? All right, so a typical Ketubeh language we see in Exodus chapter 21. It's a little bit weird because it's couched in a slave-wife situation. All right, but it's the most explicit example we got. So in Exodus 21:10, if a man who had taken a slave girl as a wife, if he takes another wife, so he's got a slave girl, he then chooses to marry her. Some of the prior passages say he'll treat her as a wife and not as a slave. Okay? If he takes another wife, he is not allowed to diminish the food, the clothing, and the marital rights of the slave wife. Right? If he does, she's allowed to leave for nothing. In this case, there's three elements: the food, clothing, and the children. And the fourth element is the divorce contract renewal, the return of the money for it. Because he paid something to get her as a slave, that's imputed as the dowry of the Ketubeh. All right? This is part of the law of Moses. This is straight from, now this predates, now I said the Ketubeh was from Babylonian time, right? But Exodus is super early in Jewish life. All right? It goes to show that this concept of food, clothing, and marital rights predates the Ketubeh itself. It's part of the ingrained culture. When they would have seen food, clothing, conjugal rights, they would have thought marriage. Okay? So if you look even in some of the later passages in Ezekiel, there is a lamentation. So God talks about having been married to Judah and Israel. Okay? So in this section of Ezekiel, that marriage language is used, and he's complaining about, look at 19. Also, not just that I gave you food, I gave you royal food. Not just that I gave you clothes, I gave you royal clothes. And you used those to feed your lovers. Okay, instead of returning the love to me, you gave it to your lovers.
Playing the harlot.
Right. So it's the same topic, it's just in different language. So in verse 19, also my bread that I gave you, man gives woman food, she's supposed to then return the prepared food as an act of love. I fed you with fine flour, with oil, with honey. You set before them, your lovers, for a pleasing aroma, and so it was, declares the Lord. Similar here. I've color-coded them so that you can see everywhere in yellow, it's food, everywhere in green, it's clothing, everywhere in blue, it's children. So as we pass through these various passages, I don't want to labor on them. I just wanted to point out that whenever we see this food, clothing, and conjugal rights, it's an indication of a marriage. The divorce one's a little bit interesting. It's really kind of not relevant for our topic, but you'll see in Hosea 2, there's actually divorce language. The divorce language is actually written into the Ketubeh. And so you'll see like the phrase, she is not my wife, I'm not her husband. It's actually said on behalf of God when he divorces Judah. He says a phrase very similar to this, which is the Ketubeh language for this kind of thing. Last one is Hosea. Hosea is a horrible, sad story, right? About, God says to this prophet, I need you to take a wife who's a harlot as a symbolic representation of me being married to Judah, right? It's a sad story, right? But you see this food, clothing, and marital rights all over the place. And specifically, similar to the Ezekiel passage, it's that I gave you these things and you used them against me. In Hosea 2:4, because they are children of whoredom, for their mother was playing the whore, she who conceived them has acted shameful. Children. That was supposed to be from the husband, but it wasn't. Okay? It's a breach of the marriage expectation. That's what this is saying. When you go down to Hosea 2:5, for she said, I will go after my lovers who will give me my bread, my water, my clothing, my flax, my oil, my drink. She thinks that her lovers will provide these things for her, right? And it turned out that they wouldn't, and she ended up getting destitute over this whole thing. That's supposed to come from a husband, right? Having said that, then when we go back and we look at Isaiah chapter 4, verse 1, and 7 women shall take hold of one man in that day, saying, we will eat our own bread. Why are they eating their own bread? That's a strange variance from the husband will provide food. They're like, I'll eat my own bread. we will wear our own clothes. I don't want your bread. I don't want your clothing. It implies here, I don't want your children. It skips it. I just want your name to take away my reproach. So this Isaiah 4:1 passage is a weird veiled thing. And I think it comes up in Isaiah 54:6.
Yeah, I'll get to that.
Okay,
Don't steal my thunder.
yeah.
Why is it, what's the deal with 7 women against 1 man? I mean, what?
I get to it.
You know, I'm thinking about all of this, and so all this sound like, today you pay child support, you want to grow up, you give her
That's not what's going on.
all of these
No.
good things here, and you take away from us, so you're gonna pay child support, and then you're gonna take care of these kids, and.
No.
Yeah, my mission was
When did all
to,
of this end, okay? Or do the Jewish people still?
Is it the 7 Gentile nations?
I just got.
You know, the 7 baskets left over? I'm sorry.
Don't get ahead.
Do I get a sucker?
We're on the right track, okay? We're on the right track. Does anybody not sign this at once on here? Anybody need this? Pass it out just for questions now?
Participation.
We're going to green ribbons in here, guys. So when I first read this, none of that registered, because I didn't know any of that stuff. I just read through. I read it completely different. I said, and there's a reason why I didn't put all that food stuff in there when I originally made the slide. When I made the slide, it was, the top part was before I talked to Tom about this, like, hey, something's weird on this verse, help me out. I read it as, hey, this is chapter 4, verse 1. Chapter 4, verse 2 is the family tree metaphor of Christ. These women, the few that were going to come out of this Jewish destruction, were going to be the remnant. They were going to latch on to the one man Christ and take his name Christian. That's all I read. That's all I saw in it, and I'm like, I don't know that that's right. I think I am reading too much into this. Because I went back, and again, this is pre me looking at the commentaries to give you all a bunch of different perspectives and stuff. They pretty much all said what Tom was saying. I'm like, oh, I may have gotten this one wrong. I need help. And so we started working on it. And we dug into it, and they were saying that this verse really should be connected to chapter 3. Hey, you women, you daughters of Jerusalem, you did all these bad things. All your men were going to be killed by the sword. So now a whole bunch of you are going to be widows, and you're going to have that reproach of not being able to have had children. That's what that reproach is. I'm like, ooh, that seems pretty solid. I may be wrong, let me go fix it. But I did not give up. I said, Tom, this is what I think it means. He goes, you could be right, but it doesn't say that. You're reading stuff that's not there, and I was like, man, I don't know why, but I just instantly thought that. Now, remember, I've read through Isaiah more than once, okay? I couldn't figure it out. Nobody on the internet was saying anything good. I couldn't figure it out. I was like, okay, I've got to go. I've got to get these 40s done. I've got to get my slides made on the chapter 40s. That's the big Cyrus the Mede comes and Babylon and all that stuff, just word for word Revelation stuff. So I've got writer's block on that, and I'm like, okay, I cannot dwell on this one verse anymore. It's not that big a deal. If it's exactly and only what he's saying, or if it's exactly and only what I'm saying, it's kind of irrelevant. So I started moving on. I was like, okay. And so I started reading. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to start reading to unjar my head on these 40s, not even looking for this anymore. And I started reading. I got to chapter 49. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. I showed it to Tom as I was on the way to one of my son's tennis matches. I said, look at this. He's like, maybe. He goes, I don't see it like you're seeing it, but maybe That's a little stronger than just this verse by itself. Went to the tennis match. Got back in the car. And I'm not reading it, I'm listening to it as I drive. I'm not reading while I drive. That would be bad.
Good to know.
So I'm listening to it on YouTube, and he got to 54. I might have almost have had a wreck. I'm like, whoa, that's what I'm saying. That's what I get really excited, and again, nobody cared but me. This is what I read, or this is what the YouTube guy read. Fear not, for thou shalt not be ashamed, neither shalt thou be confounded, for thou shalt not be put to shame, this reproach, for thou shalt forget the shame of thy youth. Thou shalt not remember the reproach of thy widowhood anymore, for thy Maker is thine husband. The Lord of hosts is his name. I was right. It took me 2 weeks to figure it out, but that's what it's talking about. This Isaiah 4:1 is leading up. It's the early example. We keep talking about this anti-type type. I'm going to start saying it the right way. By the way, I've gone through great lengths of trying to unlearn the bad way I've learned that. Kevin and Tom have helped me a lot. I may start just using the word prototype instead. I think it makes more sense. That work for you?
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's going on here is you've got this real life example of it, but it has a deeper meaning to it. And in Isaiah 54, he's getting to the point. He's getting to the deeper meaning of it. What it says in 4:1 is correct. It could be easily a literal thing. Hey, there's going to be 7 women who have this reproach because all their husbands were dead from this war. And they're going to grab onto a guy saying, take away our reproach, give us your name. That could have been happening easily. It should have been happening.
Interestingly enough, I just thought of this, there's a special call out in Acts specifically for the deacons to take care of the widows. They wouldn't have been destroyed by then, but there was a specific call out for taking care of widows.
So I think in that section, I think you're a little more literal. I think widows, the widow or widows here are really talking about Jerusalem itself.
Yeah.
Okay? Because we will get to this eventually, but they are losing their inheritance. They are losing the land. It is being given to the Gentiles. So it's more about Jerusalem, daughter of Zion, all of that stuff, more so than individual people.
So big picture, especially for our visitors, is Isaiah is talking about this break point between Judaism and Christianity, pretty much all the way through.
All the way through.
And so we're at a place where we're talking about this time frame. There's predictions that are being made, but they're made in this kind of veiled language, and that's what we've been talking about.
It's using what's going on in his day to illustrate the way that it's going to be in the first century when they make that transition. He's using languages they knew. He says, before that great and terrible day of the Lord, I'm going to send you Elijah the prophet. He doesn't bother explaining that that's a metaphor. They said, oh, okay. If he would have said, before that great and terrible day of the Lord, I'm going to send you John the Baptist, they'd be like, who? What do you mean? He would just confuse them. But when he uses the metaphor, they knew what it meant. That's why he does it. When he says, hey, there's going to be this Babylon that's going to be very oppressive when Christ comes into town riding on a donkey. I'm going to destroy them. They're like, okay, we get it. It wasn't a hard concept for them to understand. They understood what a Babylon represented, what an Egypt represented. These oppressing forces that held them captive. So that verse may be in the correct chapter after all. You get into, did I miss anything here? No. You get into the branch right after that. Now, this is prophecy of Christ all the way. You need to go look it up yourself. I provided you plenty of stuff. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to debate this with you. The branch is the Christ, is the Messiah. And when he comes, go to chapter 4. We're flying through the chapters here, ran over. In that day shall the branch of the Lord be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the earth shall be excellent. Are we coming back to this fruit that is produced? that shall be excellent, comely for them that are escaped of Israel. And it shall come to pass that he that is left in Zion, and he that remaineth in Jerusalem, shall be called holy. This is the verse I was telling you about that is tied into Revelation that I am not going to go over right now. We will come back to this at a later time. I just don't think y'all are ready for this one. When the Lord shall have, and here's the big verse. When the branch comes, the Lord will have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion. He will have purged the blood of Jerusalem from the midst thereof by the spirit of judgment and the spirit of burning. These souls under the altar were going to be avenged. The blood, go back and read Matthew 23. I brought this passage up at every single class, and I will continue to do so. They were guilty of the blood of their fathers. They were the sons of their fathers, killing the prophets and the apostles or the saints. And upon that generation was going to be brought all of that blood. They were going to pay the price. He was going to wash away their filth in the times of the Messiah, basically in the 1st century AD. And then you get some references to the Church of Christ here. And the Lord will create upon every dwelling place of Mount Zion, and upon her assemblies, a cloud and smoke by day, and the shining of a flaming fire by night. For upon all the glory shall be a defense, a covering. And there shall be a tabernacle for a shadow in the daytime from the heat, and for a place of refuge, and for a covert from storm and from rain. And then, ignore chapter breaks. Chapter breaks will mess you up. They were added like 1,000 years later. And then what does he start saying? I'm going to sing to you, sing to my well-beloved, a song of beloved, touching his vineyard. My well-beloved hath a vineyard in a very fruitful hill. I'm going to read you the Isaiah version. You should be thinking about the Matthew version where Christ is telling the parable of the vineyard here. I want you each to turn back 3 or 4 pages in your Bible to Song of Solomon, chapter 7 and chapter 8. We'll start there because it is a direct quote. And you should know that this verse is talking about the church, or this passage, this whole book really. Starting in 7 verse 10. I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. Come, my beloved, let us go forth into the field. Let us lodge in the villages. Let us get up early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine flourish, producing good fruit, not like that stupid fig tree. Whether the tender grape appears and the pomegranates bud forth, there will I give my love. The mandrakes gave a smell at our gates, all the manner of pleasant fruits, new and old, which I have laid up for thee, O my beloved. O thou wert as my brother, that sucked the breasts of my mother. When I should find thee without, I would kiss thee, yea, I would not be despised. I would lead thee and bring thee into my mother's house. Who would instruct me? I would cause thee to drink of spiced wine, of the juice of my pomegranates. His left hand would be should be under my neck, and his right hand should embrace me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, that ye stir not up, nor awake my love, until he please. You skip down a few verses there, speed up. It says, we have a little sister. She has no breasts. What shall we do for our sister in the day when she shall be spoken for? She's talking about a really younger sister here. What shall we do? I personally keep her away from Drake, but that's a different topic. We won't go into that. If she be a wall, listen to these verses. If she be a wall, we will build upon her a palace or a turret of silver. And if she be a door, we will enclose her with boards. I'm going to protect her. I am a wall, my breasts like towers. Then was I in the eyes of one that found favor. Solomon had this vineyard, so forth and so on. Now go back to Isaiah, just a couple of chapters later in the Bible. Go back to Isaiah chapter 5. Verse 1. Now I will sing to my well-beloved, the song of my beloved touching his vineyard. My well-beloved hath a vineyard in a very fruitful hill. That's a quote. And he fenced it in. He's protecting it like he said he was going to. He's talking about his people here. And he gathered out the stones thereof, and planted it with the choicest vines, and built a tower in the midst of it, and also made a winepress. That's going to come up in a minute. Built a winepress, and he looked in that it should bring forth grapes. But what happened? Bad grapes. Worthless. It's bringing not the fruit it was supposed to be bringing. You should be screaming metaphors here. You guys know this stuff. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, I pray you, betwixt me and my vineyard. What could have been done more to my vineyard that I had not done in it? What more could I have done for you? I gave you everything. Verse 5. And now go to, I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away the hedge thereof, and it shall be eaten up, and break down the wall thereof, and it shall be trodden down. You hear that language in Revelation all the time. Matthew 24, Joel, Zechariah. And I will lay it waste, and it shall not be pruned nor digged, but there shall come up briars and thorns. Here's the parable of the tares. I will also command the clouds that they rain not upon it. For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah his pleasant plant. And he looked for judgment. But what did he find? Oppression. What does yours say?
Bloodshed.
Oppression, bloodshed. It's Judah and Jerusalem, guys. They're the harlot. They're the one that God has promised pretty much the entire Bible to destroy and remove so that Christianity, the bride of Christ, could take its place. You have this language inside Revelation. Revelation 14:20. The winepress was trodden outside the city. It's the vineyard. That's what he's talking about here. He's not talking about Rome. He's talking about his people, his vineyard. What does it say? The vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel. And when you get over to the Matthew version of it, right at the end, you'll notice, this is one of my favorite verses in this study. When the chief priests and the Pharisees, when the heavens of the Jews, when the leaders of the Jews, ye rulers of Sodom, when the chief priests and Pharisees heard this parable, they perceived that he spake of them. They were correct. And what does he say? No, to that picture. What does he say there in Matthew? Matthew 21, verse 43. See if you can see it.
Therefore I tell you that the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people who will produce its fruit. He who falls on this ground will be broken.
That's it. What's he saying? Take this fig tree that did not produce any fruit and cast it into the sea. I'm taking this kingdom from you and I am giving it to the Gentiles. It's all saying the same thing. You should be able to connect the dots now. To kind of finish up 5 here, for the parable of this, that I really should close the class with that, and then we kind of move on. You know what? I am going to do that. I am gonna do that, because I don't wanna speed through this. That kind of loops us all the way back to that fig tree at the beginning, this mountain. I'm in Jerusalem here, this fig tree, hey, if you believe on me, if you're obedient, if you're faithful, points to Mount Moriah, I'm pretty sure. It doesn't say that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It's either that or Mount Sinai. Those are his only options. You can remove that as well, this oppressing city, this wicked, evil, oppressing city. You can remove that. It can be shaken and removed. Okay? We will pick up with kind of the end here. This slide is not the most important one in the world, but you'll learn stuff from it, or you'll connect stuff that you previously didn't connect. More Deuteronomy, more Sodom and Gomorrah, more vineyards. We'll bring in 2 Peter 3 for the first time. We haven't done that yet. And then we'll get to the parable of the tares, which I wanted to finish today. Tom said he was going to take 3 minutes. He took 30.
My fault.
If we would have made it, had Vanna.